I met Evan Ritchie down on the Crow's Nest, probably 94 or 95 in there, and he showed me this pattern. Now you might look at it and you think this is a stimulator, and basically it is. But it's a variation on the stimulator that Evan Ritchie tied up, and he called it the Annihilator. And he swore that it worked way better than a stimulator. So I copied it and I tied up a few, and yeah, it does have some advantages. Okay, it's tied with the body material of furry foam. Now, furry foam is this stuff, and it's basically comes in sheets like this, and it's basically foam that is furry. Okay, and I think the advantage of it is that it actually absorbs water. So it's a little messy to cast, but it lands with a big plop. And I think that summons the trout. Anyway, Evan taught me about this fly, and I figured out how to tie it on my own, and then I started tying it, and yeah, it works. Okay, so we're going to start off with the hook. The traditional hook for the stimulator appears to be the 200R, but you could also use any sort of a long shank streamer hook or anything like that. And I'm going to be using 8/0 thread here, or sorry, 6/0 thread, because with foam, if you use 8/0, sometimes it tends to cut it, and it doesn't stay together too well. So 8/0 is just a little bit thicker. Start off at the point at which I'm going to do the thorax. So the thorax is in front of this. And basically you try to lay down a nice thread body, but as I get older I'm more impatient, and I don't make the perfect touching wraps that I used to do because I can't see as well. And it's going to be, and let it hang there behind the point at which the barb was. Okay, so the material for the tail and for the wing is Elk Hair, and I've got this nice patch of Elk Hair here that I've had for a long time, and I've used quite a bit of it. And I like to use the dark stuff there for the tail, and the light stuff for the wing.
So you've got that off the neck in the middle between where there's dark and light?
Where
you got it in a shop?
I got it in a shop. I paid $8 for it.
Okay.
A while ago. Okay, so I'm going to...
Just the head and neck are dark.
It probably is.
Light.
Anyway, so I'm going to take a batch of this and get rid of the short hairs and the fluff and stuff. Now, one of my friends, Wally Lutz, ties a lot with Elk Hair, and he tells me, why do you even bother taking out the fuzzy bits? Why? You know, you just tie it in with the fuzzy bits. And he proved to me one time he tied a fly completely out of fuzzy bits from an elk, and he put it in a glass of water, and he left it for 3 days, and it was still floating. The other thing Wally does is he doesn't bother to even up the tips. He just takes it, whacks it off, and ties it on. And
he's still out around Edson?
Yep, he's still in Edson. And he got to doing that when he was tying commercially for a lodge, where he'd do like 100 dozen of a particular pattern. And so he said, yeah, it doesn't make any difference. The fish don't care. Only the fishermen might care. But anyway, I still like to even out the tips just because. So I've got a tiny little batch, and I'm going to make it about so long. So not really long, but... So I'm going to tie it in there on top and tighten it down a bit. Okay, and it flares a bit. And then I'm going to take this and spiral my thread up here, but without too much tension, all the way up to where my thorax is going to be. So one more wrap there. Okay, now it's at this point that I'm going to tighten down and that really flares out there. Now the tricky part is to, scissors, there we go. I just want to try to gather all of this up and snip it off. It's not really important to be really neat because you're going to be covering all this stuff up. But you want to make sure you have all of that out. And then just for the sake of tying it in, I tie in all that really, really nice and tight. Okay. Now, as I go back over the body, I'm going to spiral back, and then I'm going to take one tight wrap. Spiral back, take another tight wrap. Spiral back, take another tight wrap. And then I spiral back to the beginning point. Okay, so that leaves a fairly even underbody there, and you want an even underbody because otherwise your fly is going to look out of proportion. It's going to look lumpy. But I'm also trying to keep some of the floatability of the elk. Okay, now hackle. The one that I originally had in the vise, I would say that the hackle that I put on there was just way too small on the body hackle and way too large on the hackle around the thorax. So this one is just a touch longer, and it's going to be made even longer when yeah. So I'm just using those tight wraps. Okay, so furry foam. Furry foam comes in these sheets, and what I like to do is to tie it into approximately an 1/8 of an inch strips on the lengthways part. Now, and there's my furry foam. It's stretchy, and it ties in, compresses nicely. Okay. Now, one of the things that I found out, I wanted to do this in this lovely orange color. I haven't been able to find orange in the shops for a while, and so I pulled out this stuff. But unfortunately, this stuff has a shelf life. Okay. What I found was that it just sort of, when I tugged on it, it just came apart. So it lasts less than 20 years.
You couldn't send it back?
Can't see.
Send it back?
Did you take it back, Mike?
You know, I don't think
That's no longer a problem.
I don't think that Denny's would take it back. Okay. So anyway, for this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie this into sort of a point here. There. So I've got a point to tie in. And ordinarily, with a lot of these materials, what you would do is you'd tie the whole length of the body just to compress it and keep it even. But this compresses nicely on its own. Okay, so get the thread up there, and that's where I'm gonna end. So basically, it's just a matter of wrapping this around. You overlap a little bit, but not too much. And it looks nice and buggy. And then one more wrap there. Okay, now I'm going to tie that off nicely. If I was really, really good, I could just leave this piece on and use it to wrap the thorax. But every time I tried that when I was practicing this, it just didn't work out at all for me. So I'm just going to clip this off, and I'll retie a new piece on. And then I want to wrap that down tightly. Okay, so the hackle, couple wraps at the rear, and then I'm sort of following the segments of the furry foam all the way up to this thing. One of the things that made the stimulator possible was the advent of this long saddle hackle. I mean, back in the old days, you couldn't have, I mean, you just with the Indian necks and those things, it's just what the length of the feathers just wasn't long enough to do this. But once these things came along, you could do a palmer like this, and it would turn out really, really nice. Okay. Now, some people I understand like to cut this stuff off because it seems to get in the way, but I don't bother with that. So now I'm going to use more elk, and for this I use 2 to 3 times what I used with the tail. And I always end up taking out a pretty big piece and then pulling out all the short ones and end up with a piece about like that. And also I'm going to stack it. Now, I'm going to measure this. We want this to be a little bit longer than the tail. Okay? And you may notice that there are some blunt ones in there. And if I was offended by them, I could go in and pick them out. But do the fish care? No. Okay? So what I'm going to do is going to take one wrap right around the whole bunch. Okay, let's try that again. So this is a trick that Bill Robertson showed me a long time ago. Once around the whole bunch, and this is
a trick that Arnie Gidlow showed him.
Showed him? Okay. Okay. Well, I learned it from Bill, so give credit for him. Okay. So I'm going to tie that down, a little bit tighter wraps going forward. Okay, now that is still sticking up a little higher than I want it to, but I'll fix that later. And then I get my scissors, and I want to go in here, and I want to leave room for the head, because I always crowd the head. It's just my natural tendency is to crowd the head too much. So we just sort of go in, and there I've got some room for a head. And then I'm going to gather these things up and try to tie them all in. See, there's some few ugly ones in there, but that's okay. We'll just stroke them back and tie them in. Okay. So now when I come back here, what I can do is I can go back and I can do a loose sort of wrap there. That's going to push this part down a bit, and then go forward and tighten it up. Okay, and if I want it to spread out a little bit more, I just give it a few tugs and do that. And let's have a look at this. That's not too bad. Okay. So except for the furry foam, it's basically or ordinary stimulator. Now I'm going to try, and for the hackle and the thorax, what you want is something that's longer than the other stuff. So I'm going to tie this in by the butt, whereas I tied the other stuff in by the tip. The reason I tied that one in by the tip is to so it's short here and it gradually gets longer. And I don't think it matters a whole lot, but it just looks nicer to me. So there we go, tie that in. And now I need some more furry foam. Now if I was a talented fly tyer, I would have just been tying in the piece that I'd left hanging from before. But I'm going to just tie in another piece here, because I figure I might as well use this stuff before my 20 years is up. Okay, so then I'm going to wrap this here, and you notice how the thorax is much thicker. And I usually get about 3 wraps in here. I'm going to just go there. Tie that off. Try not to crowd the eye, and then just tie that in really good. And already building up a head. Okay, so now I take the hackle. There's one offensive piece of elk hair that just sort of slipped out of. And I might be able to get one more wrap out of this here. So tie that in, and then just smooth out the head a little bit. Whip finish. Throw some cement, which you don't have, onto the head.